The silk clung when I pulled it over my shoulders, catching grains of sand that shouldn't have been there. Each thread hissed like a match struck too close to skin. I stood still, holding my breath, as if silence could smooth the fabric flat, as if quiet could erase the evidence of where I had been. But it didn't. The rustle betrayed me. The room was empty, yet I felt watched. Always watched. Like the walls themselves leaned forward, curious, hungry. NNTHE glass door was cracked open, a thin slit letting the ocean's breath seep in. Salt clung to my lips. The air carried a rhythm, the hush and slap of waves against the dock, that almost matched the pulse at my throat. Almost. My heartbeat lagged, then leapt, then stuttered. I pressed my fingers to my collarbone as if I could steady it, but the contact only sharpened the awareness that my body remembered more than I wanted it to. Sand under the silk, silk against damp skin, skin remembering heat that had once not been a danger. Behind me, the ceiling fan turned lazily, its blades slicing the light into uneven beats. Shadows slipped across the wall, briefly resembling a man's silhouette and then stretching long, breaking apart. I turned too quickly. The room blurred, and the stem of a wine glass knocked against the edge of the table with a crystalline ping. The sound was too sharp, too clear. My breath caught. That was the montage's first fracture. Not silence anymore, but sound cutting through, like a warning no one else would hear. And I set the glass upright with slow fingers, watching the last tremor of red cling to its inside curve. That stain looked too much like a memory. My reflection shimmered faintly on the surface, face split by light. For 1 second, I saw myself as if from another's gaze. Tilted head, tense jaw, lips parted not for words but for breath I hadn't released. The camera would linger there. On the almost, the withheld NNMY feet moved without order, carrying me toward the balcony. The boards were warm still, though the sun had already fallen, its afterglow bleeding across the horizon. Gold smeared into indigo, and the sea caught both colors in restless folds. My hair stirred in the onshore wind, and again the silk shifted, whispering its betrayal against my back. That was when the second fracture arrived. This one not in sound, but in vision. A flash of silver in the water, just a trick of light, or maybe not. For an instant, it looked like someone surfacing. Annie and I held the railing, knuckles whitening. My inner voice whispered that I had chosen exile, chosen distance, but my body resisted the lie. The island was supposed to hide me, yet each texture, each grain, each tremor reminded me I had not escaped. I had carried it all here. The betrayal, the hunger, the risk. My pulse insisted it knew, faint metallic chime carried from inside. The fan chain hitting the glass shade, pendulum quickened by an unseen draft. I turned back, too sharply again, and in that moment, I caught myself doubled. Once in the shadow stretching across the floor, once in the reflection of the door's glass pane. Both versions of me stared back, mismatched in posture, unsynchronized. That was the montage's third fracture, two selves caught in the same frame. NNTHE wine glass still waited on the table, a red trace thickening, darkening as if the liquid grew heavier with time. The camera would close in, find that detail, hold it, until the audience shifted uneasily. Because a glass doesn't accuse, but it does remember, and I let the silence close again, only broken by the relentless sea, the lazy fan, the pulse in my throat. That was the hook. Not his presence. Not yet. Just the certainty that absence had texture too. That absence pressed just as hard as touch. And in the final shot, I let the silk slip from one shoulder, deliberately. Sand fell in a faint stream, soundless, like an hourglass tipped sideways. That would be the echo the scene leaves behind. The sense that time itself had entered the room with me, and that I was already out of it. He stood where the light broke, half in shadow, half in gold. I had seen him before, across crowded galleries, behind champagne laughter, but never like this. Never silent. Never close enough that the absence of his words became louder than the room itself. My body reacted before thought did. Breath shallow, pulse ticking against silk, the same silk that still remembered sand. It clung as though it, too, recognized him. And I told myself to move, to pass him like a stranger. But the air was already charged. Magnetic, chemical, a current pulling me across the polished floor. Each step left a faint hush. a friction between leather and wood that sounded like hesitation. He didn't turn, not yet. He allowed the tension to thicken, let me fill the silence with my own remembering. That was his first play, stillness as dominance. The table between us carried only one object, a silver lighter. Its presence felt wrong, like a misplaced clue in a perfect scene. I watched the glint catch the overhead light, sharp as a blade. When his hand finally moved, it was not to greet, not to reach, but to brush one finger across the lighter's edge. Casual, controlled, as if he'd just written his name on the air and dared me to read it. My throat tightened. I did not blink. Behind me, the ceiling fan clattered once, its chain slapping glass. The sudden noise startled the room, like a stage cue missed. My hand twitched against my side, betraying nerves I thought I had tamed. He noticed. The small flick of his eyes confirmed it. Power imbalance established. He, the calm axis. I, the disrupted orbit, and I moved closer. Slow enough for the camera to catch the distance narrowing frame by frame. His suit absorbed the light, black fabric swallowing gold, while his cufflink winked with precision. He lifted his glass, not to drink, but to balance it loosely, dangerously, as though one tilt could spill red across white linen. My eyes followed the liquid sway, hypnotized, waiting for the accident that never came. That was his second play, threat without act. Space between us collapsed to a breath. My shoulder brushed the air his body displaced, and my skin betrayed me. Gooseflesh rising uninvited, heat blooming where no touch had landed. I tilted my chin higher, feigned control. But inside, my heartbeat struck like a drum counting down. He inhaled, soft and audible, a sound more intimate than words. I felt it ripple through me as if the breath had crossed into my lungs. From the corner, a clock ticked, a detail I hadn't noticed until now. Each second cut sharper than the last, slicing the silence into exact measures. His gaze followed me, unhurried, dissecting. Mine fought to stay steady, though my throat was dry. If the camera caught me now, it would see the micro-movements. The swallow, the tremor at my wrist, the slight sway, as though gravity pulled unevenly. Set the glass down. Slow. Too slow. The bass clicked softly against wood, and that minor sound became enormous in the hush. My body flinched as if struck, betraying my own expectation of a spill, a shatter. But nothing broke. Nothing except the illusion that I held control. Lighter remained between us. Unmoved. Gleaming. My eyes dropped to it, betraying curiosity I should have hidden. He saw. His lips curved. Not a smile, not yet, but the ghost of one. Enough to declare he had won the first round. And I drew back, just a fraction, but enough for the silk to sigh across my skin. The sound betrayed me again. My body announced my retreat louder than footsteps could. His gaze lowered briefly to my shoulder where fabric slipped, and that glance landed heavier than touch. In the final shot, the camera would linger not on his face, not on mine, but on the lighter. A small, cold object, poised, waiting to be claimed. The symbol of control, past or taken. That would be the echo I carried out of the room. Not his words. He hadn't spoken a single one. Only the weight of silence, sharpened into possession. The sea was louder that night, crashing in intervals that seemed timed to my pulse. I stood at the veranda's edge, glass in hand, salt wind biting my lips. He wasn't supposed to follow me here, not into the dark where the island erased boundaries, but I felt him long before I saw him. The air thickened, warmth pressing at my back like a question I didn't want answered. And I told myself to stay still, to let the ocean drown out everything else. But then the boards creaked beneath deliberate weight. His silhouette grew in the reflection of the glass door, distorted, doubled, watching without touching. That was his presence, a shadow that didn't need contact to invade. My hand trembled just once, and the wine inside my glass tilted dangerously close to spilling. The ruby edge caught moonlight, and for a second it looked like blood about to mark the floor. When he finally stepped closer, the night seemed to bend around him. The scent of smoke clung faintly to his suit, threaded with citrus, like memory trying to disguise itself. He didn't speak. Of course he didn't, but his gaze pinned me from the side, daring me to break the silence first. The camera would catch it, my throat tightening, the breath that caught, the eyes that refused to turn, even as every nerve screamed to. I shifted my weight, subtle, but the wood underfoot betrayed me with a groan. He heard. He always heard. He moved then, slow, unhurried, until the warmth of him brushed my arm. My skin erupted, treacherous, as though the night itself had lit a fuse along me. The sea roared, masking nothing. Between us sat the wine glass, fragile, trembling in my grip. He reached, not for me, but for the bottle on the table. His fingers brushed mine only in accident, or maybe not accident at all. The contact was nothing, the barest slip of skin, yet my heart jolted like struck glass. I covered it with a sip, though the liquid burned, thicker than it should. He poured into his own glass, unbroken eye contact, holding me still, tethered, even as I tried to act detached. NNTHE Ocean delivered its rhythm, relentless, and the night answered with a sudden intrusion. A gull shriek, raw and cutting, slicing through the scene. I startled, betraying myself again. His jaw tightened at that moment. Not anger, but satisfaction. He had caught me flinch, and he filed it away like another possession. NNTHE wine reflected both of us now, two silhouettes trapped in the curve of glass. My gaze locked there, unwilling to meet his directly, yet unable to look away. He let it linger, allowed me the illusion of control through avoidance. That was his play tonight. Patience sharpened into power. And I drew in a deeper breath, forcing steadiness, and set my glass down. Too fast. The stem clicked against wood, a sharp sound. His eyes flicked to it, then back to me, reading every imbalance. He leaned fractionally closer, the kind of proximity that dared me to step back. But I didn't. My spine held, though every instinct screamed retreat. NNHI's cuff brushed mine. Silk against silk, almost weightless, yet enough for the camera to close in on. My skin carried the echo of that friction long after. The contact was fleeting, but the afterimage pulsed like a bruise. My body cataloged it even as my mind insisted it meant nothing. NNFOR, a moment the scene widened. The veranda, the sea, the lantern swaying above, casting shadows that danced between us. In one frame, the camera would pull wide, two figures, almost touching, suspended in a fragile geometry of want and refusal. In the next, it would cut back to detail. The ripple in my wine, the condensation sliding down the glass, the single drop falling to the wood. That drop would be the symbol. The anchor NNHE shifted at last, stepping back a fraction, but his gaze didn't release me. It lingered, heavy, pulling, until I felt hollow without its weight. My hands curled against the railing, nails pressing into wood, grounding myself against the draw. The night swallowed his retreating step, but the imprint remained. When he finally turned, leaving me with nothing but the sound of waves, the echo was unbearable. My body leaned forward as though to follow, traitorous. I forced myself still, breath shallow, the taste of wine sharp as regret. In the last shot, the camera would hold not on him, but on the drop of wine that had fallen earlier, dark red, absorbed into pale wood grain. A small wound the veranda would keep, a reminder that something had already seeped in, staining, permanent. The villa's corridors held their own silence. Polished marble, long shadows, echoes of footsteps swallowed before they could return. I told myself I was only moving through, crossing from one wing to another. But every surface carried reflection, and in each reflection I half expected him to appear, watching. My own image betrayed me, lips parted, shoulders too rigid, pulse beating at the hollow of my throat. At the far end, a mirror waited, taller than the doorways, framed in gilt that glowed faintly under the low lamps. I slowed, caught by it unwillingly. The glass didn't give me back just myself. It multiplied, fractured. I saw myself step forward, then stop, the hesitation doubling, tripling. Behind me, nothing moved. Yet in one angle of reflection, I thought I saw a shift. A darker shape, blurred, then gone. And I kept walking, though slower now. The rhythm of my heels against marble became a metronome of tension. Left, right, pause. Each step heavier than the last. Then, another sound. Not mine. Lighter, quicker, then deliberately quiet. He was here. Or maybe it was the house itself, holding echoes meant to break me open. And I reached the library. The door gave with a weighty sigh, wood and brass resisting, as though the room wanted me to stay out. Inside, the air changed. Warmer, close, carrying leather, paper, dust, and something sharper, the faint trace of smoke again. The curtains moved, though the windows were closed. My heart caught on the detail. He was inside, had been inside, maybe still was. And books lined the walls, 1,000 spines watching. I crossed slowly, trailing my hand across the edge of a table. The wood was cool, too polished. My reflection skated across its surface, blurred but present. I caught myself pausing, bending slightly, as though listening to the silence. It answered with a small, almost imperceptible click, floorboard perhaps, or a shift of weight behind the shelves. And I should have turned then. Should have left, closed the door. Instead, I moved deeper, drawn not by logic but by the compulsion of being observed. My body sought it out, the invisible thread pulling taut. I stopped at a ladder leaned against the shelves. One rung bore a mark, faint but deliberate, as though someone's hand had pressed there longer than necessary. I touched it. The wood was warmer than the rest. My breath shortened. NNTHE camera would cut here. My fingers against the rung, the tremor that betrayed me, the faint sheen of sweat at my temple. Then a sudden intrusion, a book sliding loose from a shelf above, falling with a crack against the floor. I jumped back, hitting the table behind me. The sound echoed far too long, rattling through the room like an accusation. Now looked up. Nothing. No hand, no presence revealed. Just silence, thickening again. The book lay open, pages splayed, words indecipherable from my distance. I crouched slowly, picked it up. The spine groaned, paper dry and brittle. My hands shook slightly as I turned it. No mark, no note, just random text. Yet the feeling was clear. It had been pushed. A shadow crossed the wall. Too fast, too quiet. I spun, breath sharp. Empty. The curtain still swayed, though no window was open. My chest tightened with the effort of holding still. He was here, or the memory of him was. Both were unbearable. And I replaced the book, careful, deliberate, though my pulse betrayed the act. My hand lingered on the shelf too long. My reflection in the glass of the cabinet warped my face, stretching my eyes wide, making me a stranger. The camera would hold on that distortion. Me doubled, unsettled, cracked. Then, from nowhere, a sound like breath. Not mine. Behind me, impossibly close. I froze, the back of my neck prickling as though touched. No weight, no hand, just the certainty of nearness. My heart stuttered, breath caught. I didn't move. If I turned, he would be there. If I didn't, the not knowing would burn me alive. Finally, I moved, sharp, spinning, empty space. The chair by the fire sat angled, as if someone had just left it. The glass on the table bore condensation, half drunk. The detail cut deeper than any direct touch. Proof he had been here, proof he might still return. NNTHE shot would close in on that glass, droplets sliding down, pooling at the base, staining the wood in a ring. A simple mark, temporary yet undeniable. The echo of presence. The room seemed to lean in around it, pressing the fact into me. I left without turning back, but the feeling clung to me like smoke and fabric. Every step through the corridor carried weight, each reflection in the marble taunting me with possibilities of shadows not mine. In the last frame, the camera would hold not on my face but on the ring left by that glass. The stain dark against the polished table, fading slowly but refusing to vanish. A mark waiting to be noticed again, to be claimed. The garden at night pretended to be silent, but silence is only a costume. Beneath it, every leaf shifted, every branch sighed, every insect carried the rumor of movement. I stepped onto the terrace, the stone cold against my heels, and let the air press itself against my skin. Damp, sweet with overripe fruit, sharpened by the salt that drifted from the sea. NNTHE lamps threw small pools of light, fragile circles fighting the dark. In one of them, a table stood waiting, a chessboard left half played. The pieces leaned toward one another as if in argument, frozen mid-threat. I touched a pawn, felt the coolness of marble, slid it one square forward. The tiny scrape against the board broke the quiet like a whisper meant to be overheard. NNTHAT was when I felt it. Eyes, not on my face but lower, tracing the path of my arm, the bend of my wrist, the hollow where shadow gathered at my collarbone. I didn't turn immediately. I let the sensation bloom, let it travel up my spine, then pretended not to notice. Only when the breath in my chest grew too heavy did I glance sideways. NHE stood in the darkness just beyond the lamplight, not hidden, not revealed, outlined by absence. A suit, loosened tie, hands slipping into his pocket with practiced ease. The posture was casual, but his stillness betrayed him. Stillness is always a decision. N and I turned back to the board, as though he were merely an invention of the garden, a trick of shadow. My hand lingered above the queen. The temptation to move her, to risk her, was sharper than the sea air. A move that would expose everything. I set her down with care instead, the echo of marble on wood louder than it should have been. NNHE stepped closer then. Not fully into the light, only enough for me to see his outline sharpen. The tilt of his head, the suggestion of a smirk half swallowed by the dark. His silence was deliberate. He wanted me to fill it. My pulse filled it instead. NNTHE camera would cut to my glass of wine on the table. Red, almost black, surface trembling as though it too sensed his approach. I lifted it, more shield than drink, and felt the stem fragile between my fingers. The wine clung to the rim as I tilted it, staining the glass like blood reluctant to be swallowed. Another step. His shoe struck a fallen leaf, the crunch impossibly loud in the night. The garden leaned closer, listening. I kept my gaze on the board, though every nerve screamed to turn, to meet the silence he carried with him. Desire is cruel in that way. It demands attention while pretending to hide. NNHE reached the edge of light. For a moment, the lamps caught the glassy reflection in his eyes. Not a full reveal, just enough to anchor the fact that he was real. I breathed too sharply, and the sound betrayed me. The glass in my hand trembled, droplets running down to kiss my skin. I set it down before I broke it. The ring it left on the wood was precise, accusing. He watched me create it. I let him. Then, without warning, a gust of wind tore through the garden. The chessboard scattered, pieces rolling across stone, some toppling into the grass. The violence of it startled me. I flinched, my chair scraping against the terrace. By the time I looked back, he had retreated into the shadows again, as though the wind had carried him off. And NBUT, the proof remained. A knight lay at my feet, carved in ivory, its head cracked by the fall. I bent to pick it up, cradled it in my palm. The fracture split its proud face in two. The camera would hold here. My hand, the broken knight. The tremor that gave me away. And I looked up, expecting him to be gone. Instead, far across the terrace, I saw only the trace of smoke rising from somewhere hidden. He had lit another cigarette, letting the ember glow for a second before snuffing it out with deliberate cruelty. A signal, not an accident. NNTHE final frame would linger on the chessboard, abandoned in disarray. One queen standing upright, alone, surrounded by fallen pawns. The garden swallowed the sound again, but the image was set. A game disrupted, unfinished, waiting for someone to resume. And I stepped back from the table, the broken knight still in my hand. The silence closed over me like water. Every shadow suggested him. Every rustle accused me of staying too long. And still, I didn't move faster. My body betrayed me, savoring the ache of being seen, even from the dark. The villa's grand hall was built for display, not for comfort. Every column polished, every chandelier engineered to sparkle like a crown. Yet beneath the glow, the marble was cold, the echo of footsteps too sharp, too accusing. I walked across it, heels catching, each click ricocheting upward into the high ceiling until it felt as though the sound itself was chasing me, and a gathering had formed. Guests in silk and velvet, the air swollen with perfume and champagne laughter. Their movements overlapped like dancers in a choreography they had rehearsed 1,000 times. Touch of wrist, brush of shoulder, tilt of glass. And yet the rhythm had fractures. Every smile lasted a beat too long, every glance darted away too quickly. Desire and suspicion twined together, tight as a noose. I felt the heat of bodies, but a chill licked the back of my neck. A draft whispered through the open doors to the balcony, carrying the scent of salt and smoke. I let my hand trail along the banister as though steadying myself, though I was not unsteady. It was a cover, a decoy, because I could feel him watching, always from just beyond where others noticed. NNTHE camera would shift to the mirrored wall. There I saw myself multiplied, refracted, broken into fragments. In one pane, I stood still. In another, I appeared to lean towards someone unseen. My own image betrayed me, playing out choices I had not yet made. When I lifted my glass, the reflection raised it first. The lag was an illusion, but it cut through me. NNHE moved then, through the crowd, with the ease of someone both welcome and feared. People adjusted unconsciously, giving him space without realizing it. That was his real power, to shape the room without lifting a hand. He passed behind me, close enough for his sleeve to brush the silk at my elbow. No words, no glance, just contact. A spark so small it could be denied, yet my pulse hammered against my ribs as though it had been a confession. NNTHE chandelier above us trembled. Perhaps from a draft, perhaps from something else. Its crystals clashed together, 1,000 tiny chimes ringing over the low murmur of voices. Every head tilted upward for a moment, but only I saw him pause under the rain of light, his face briefly illuminated. A sculpture of intent, dangerous in its stillness. There I moved toward the balcony. The air was cooler there, sharp against my skin. The ocean spread out black and infinite, waves striking the rocks below with a rhythm older than any lie. I gripped the railing, the iron biting into my palms. The world outside seemed endless, yet behind me the party pressed close, threatening to swallow me whole. NNHE followed. I didn't hear him, but I knew. The shift in the air gave him away. The subtle displacement of breath, the faint disturbance of presence. I turned slightly, enough to catch his silhouette reflected in the glass doors. He wasn't touching me, not yet, but the image showed him near enough that it looked like a claim. My throat tightened. NNTHE montage would linger here, my fingers tracing the condensation on the glass, his shadow overlaid across mine, the ocean beyond pounding like a heartbeat too loud. No words could measure this distance, but the silence itself became dialogue. Then, the interruption. A crash inside, the sound of a glass shattering on marble. Guests laughed nervously, the moment disguised as accident. But accidents are also messages. I didn't turn back. Neither did he. The shards would remain where they fell, glittering like dangerous stars underfoot. I closed my eyes and let the night press in. His presence behind me was no longer a question but an answer. I wanted to step forward into the sea, or backward into him. Either way, the fall would be inevitable. The weight of the choice became heavier than the iron railing in my grip. NTHE final shot. My hand loosening, not letting go but allowing the mark of the railing to fade from my skin. When I turned, the camera cut before his face could be fully revealed. Only the ember of his cigarette glowed, a brief flare before the darkness swallowed it. The ocean roared, the chandelier hummed behind us, and the air thickened with everything unsaid. NNTHE echo that remained was not sound but sensation. The ghost of his sleeve against my arm, the memory of glass trembling, the fracture of reflection. The hall, the garden, the sea, all of it conspired to hold me in a moment stretched beyond time. And that was the truth of it. The game had never been about who would win. It was about who could endure the silence long enough to remain standing when the music stopped.